The topic this evening is broken bonds, exploring the experiences of Victorian renters. And I'm very pleased that Dale Walker has been able to spare some time. It's been a busy period for him, I know. He's the head of partnerships and fundraising at Anika Legal. And Anika Legal is a registered charity and community legal centre. Their vision is a world where everyone can access justice. And I hope that Dale is going to tell us a little bit more about how Anika Legal works, because I had not heard of it before Humanists Victoria gave them a modest grant this year. And I was fascinated to see the extent of the service and how easy it is for anyone to take their problems and their inquiries up to them. So Dale's passionate about social justice, and he's been an advocate for housing policy reform for a long time and believes that everyone deserves a safe home. So I might then hand over to you, Dale, to tell us about the work that you are doing and the report that will shortly be available for everybody to get their teeth into and hopefully advocate for some of the reforms that you now understand are necessary. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny. And I completely agree with you. Everyone does deserve a healthy home. But for the Australians who rent their homes, there's a lot of barriers in the way at the moment. Today, I've got a few things to chat with you all about. I would just quickly also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. My wife and I own a small townhouse up in Pascoe Vale. There are some stunning creeks this side of the city that we love to walk along and keep an eye out for wildlife. And we know that's only possible thanks to the care that the Indigenous Australian people took with this land. So I'd like to pay my acknowledgements to elders past, present, and emerging. Now, over the next short while, I'm going to chat with you, I guess first a bit of context. So we'll chat a bit about the rental housing system as it stands in Victoria. I'll tell you a bit about the work we do at Anika Legal as a not-for-profit law firm in the rental housing space. And as Jenny mentioned, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at some of the really shocking findings from our upcoming report into the rental bond system. Now, the first part of tonight is going to sound a lot like me just making a long list of complaints about the rental market. But if you bear with me, I promise we'll get into some hard data and we'll finish with some ways that we can all influence change to make a fairer rental housing system for everyone. So let's chat about renting. About 1 in 3 Australians rent their homes now, and more people are renting longer term. People are retiring in rental homes. People are being born and growing up in rental homes. It's really becoming a core part of the Australian experience. And all of these people deserve a healthy home, but renters often don't have one. For reasons outside of a renter's control, their homes are too hot in summer, too cold in winter. As a result, they're paying higher energy costs, trying to keep the temperature comfortable. They're healthy even. And many of our clients at Anika are losing sleep over needing to raise their kids in unsafe conditions. In theory, renters have tenancy rights, which entitle them to live in a property in good repair. However, the tenancy system is designed in a way where renters must enforce their own rights. They have to self-advocate. They have to self-enforce. And it's just unrealistic for most renters for a lot of reasons. There's a real power imbalance that exists between renters and rental providers. Right now, it's extremely difficult to find a rental property. Just this year, rental vacancies have reached an all-time low. And the harder it is to find a rental property, the less you feel able to stand up for your rights because you're in fear of facing a retaliatory eviction or a rent increase that you can't afford. And you're worried that you won't be able to find another home if you have to leave your current one. For the people who do decide to advocate for themselves, they need to educate themselves on complex tenancy rules and legislation. They need to negotiate with a real estate agent who is a trained professional in this area. And then they need to find both the time and the courage to assert their rights against this real estate agent at a tribunal hearing. Especially for vulnerable renters, enforcement of tenancy rights is an overwhelming and an unrealistic proposition. And it just doesn't happen. Renters don't show up to almost 80% of residential tenancy VCAT hearings, and 40% of renters with a strong repairs case choose not to proceed to VCAT because they're too scared to face off against a real estate agent at a legal hearing, which I think is a completely reasonable way to feel about that process. Shifting the burden of enforcement from renters to government would address the most pressing problems faced by renters. But current tenancy laws, even when followed, don't give renters housing security. They're still at risk of being evicted for no reason, or of receiving a rent increase that they can't afford. The common argument is that supply and demand will moderate rent prices, and renters will find properties in line with their means, or in other words, that the free market will take care of things. But there's the housing crisis, which suggests if we leave an essential service to the free market, there's really no guarantee that Australians are going to receive that service. And this isn't a problem caused by landlords. The problem is that so much of what's required for a renter to secure a safe home for their families relies almost entirely on a lucky roll of the dice, finding a landlord who is adhering to these minimum standards. And the system, it just can't rely on goodwill. Even if 9 out of every 10 landlords is extremely ethical, keeps the house in really good repair, that 1 in 10 renters who gets unlucky, it's not an acceptable way for a system to run, not for an essential service like housing. And advocating for that systemic change is where companies like Anika Legal come in. Now, Jenny gave a really lovely intro to who we are and what we do. I will expand on that a little bit. It's really our goal at Anika to support vulnerable Victorian renters. We're a community legal centre. Our vision is a world where everyone can access justice, and we provide free and ongoing legal support to renters. And we help them with issues spanning evictions, repairs, and claims against their bonds. In 5 short years, we've supported nearly 1,000 clients. Our services are fully accessible to remote access, they're virtual, it's all done over the phone. It's really, really easy to navigate. Renters just submit an inquiry through our website, and one of the paralegals that works with us reaches out to them. And what I would love to do is tell you a couple of the stories of some of the clients that we've worked with over the last few years. Now, it's freezing in Melbourne at the moment, so I'm going to give you a couple of case studies that we can probably all relate to pretty easily right now. The first is one of our clients. Her name is Eleanor. Eleanor is a refugee and a single mum, and she was living with her baby in a house that was falling down around her. The windows wouldn't still shut. There was no insulation. There were gaps in the floorboards wide enough that she could feel the breeze coming up through the floor. She told us once that the worst part of her day is the morning because she'll walk into a baby's room and she could actually see the fog coming from her baby's breath. As if anyone can imagine, you don't need to be a parent to imagine how horrifying that must feel. And she reached out to a real estate agent requesting repairs. She tried calling, texting, emailing. Her landlord refused to authorize repairs, and the real estate agent didn't get back to her after that point. Now, what Eleanor had to do to keep her baby healthy and safe was buy, one of those little space heaters, and she had to run it around the clock just to keep the room warm enough. And this was just her baby's room. But as you probably know, those things chew through power. Her energy bills skyrocketed because she had to pay those bills to keep the power on. She fell behind on her rent. And suddenly it wasn't a problem trying to get in contact with the real estate agent anymore. They were absolutely hounding her. Now, thankfully, we were able to support. Eleanor did find us. We were able to keep her in that house and secure those repairs for her. But a renter like Eleanor shouldn't need legal support just to make the house she's living in safe. The next client I'd like to tell you about is a gentleman called Matt. Matt was renting with his family, and they had ducted heating in the house. And what they discovered was that the ducted heating was leaking carbon monoxide gas into the house. He's living there with his wife and kids. And he thought, as would probably any of us, Asha would, that the real estate agent would act really quickly to get that fixed. But that wasn't the case. The landlord's solution was to just shut it off. No more carbon monoxide leaking, but now no heating. And, it's another freezing cold Melbourne winter. Again, we were able to provide legal support to Matt. We were able to secure those repairs for them and make the home safe for him and his family. But again, it's just it's unjust that you should need to go through that process and really advocate for your own rights just to live in a house that's safe for your family. So those are just two of the nearly 1,000 clients that we've worked with so far. I'm going to try playing a video now, and I'm hoping that it works. But give me a thumbs down if it's not coming through properly, and I'll share it around afterwards. But with any luck, you'll meet a couple more of our clients in this video.
Each year, there are over 600,000 Australians who can't get legal help that they need. These people are locked out of the justice system. They are unable to get a fair legal outcome. Anika Legal exists to fight for a world where everyone can access justice.
Moving house is quite stressful anyway. We moved into a house, we were paying quite a decent whack of rent. Turned out that none of the things that we thought we were getting, and we can read forms and all that sort of stuff, but we didn't know where we were with respect to lease break fees, and the landlord was very threatening. So that's how we came into contact with Anika.
It's really difficult. The system's not really geared in your favour. Like for 2 years I was thinking, when am I going to get this resolved? And then when I had some sort of clear advice and a sort of statement in front of me from Anika, she read out what the history was, what my position was, I just felt more in control, I suppose, less scared of possibly losing everything.
For our clients, working with Anika Legal is a positive experience because they get to speak with our student interns one-on-one every week, every fortnight. You have a human touch walking with you every step of your legal journey.
One thing that I'm so proud of is being able to communicate more professionally with clients and supervising lawyers. And now I'm actually helping people with a system that's meant to be for pursuing rights, and it's really quite interesting and motivating.
By designing around the students specifically, we're able to help more people, but also give students a better learning experience. For me, it's really fulfilling to see clients who come out of our service not only happy because we've helped them, but happy because they come out of our service feeling more empowered.
I suppose at one point I felt I should just give up and let him have the bond money. It's nice to know that people are there to support you and help you. I suppose I felt a little bit disbelieving. And it's also really great. I mean, they're really great because they've helped hundreds of renters like me.
We thought we might be tied up in dealing with this person for the next year or two, but it was all resolved very quickly, and it was actually a fantastic outcome, and we were very appreciative of what Anika did for us.
Everyone deserves a safe home. Everyone deserves the dignity of a safe home. If you have your legal rights upheld, but in the process of achieving that, you're made to feel disrespected or frustrated or powerless, that's not justice. For Anika Legal, justice is having your rights upheld, but also maintaining your dignity in the process.
So that's a bit about us. You got to see Jenny, one of our student paralegal interns, in there as well. And people like Jenny are one of the reasons that we're able to really have quite a large impact with a very small team. We have law students volunteer with us as paralegals. They meet with clients, they draft legal advice, and then practicing lawyers review the advice before anything goes back to the clients. And with that way, we're able to provide really good learning experiences for the students. But it also effectively doubles the capacity of the practicing lawyers who are both on staff and who also volunteer their time for us pro bono. And so while it's really great to be able to help individuals out with their legal needs, we've come to learn that real systemic change needs a bit of a different approach. And so what we do at Anika is we use the data that we gather by working these cases. We use that data to build the body of evidence, and then we use that evidence to advocate for systemic change in what we see as being the most urgent areas needed to reform for a fairer rental system. And that's where we're going to spend the rest of the night, really, talking about some of that advocacy work. So in a bit under 2 weeks, on the 2nd of July, we'll be publishing our newest advocacy report. Now, this one is all about the rental bond system. It's called Broken Bonds. I think it's a pretty catchy title. AI helped us come up with the title. And we spent about 2 years. So between 2022 and 2023, we were working with quite a number of clients who had claims made against their bonds by their landlords at the end of their tenancy. And we've gathered all the data from working with those cases, and we also ran a survey more broadly across renters in Victoria. And together, we've brought those findings into this report. And there's some really shocking stuff in there. And I'm going to give you a bit of a sneak peek today. I would just ask the data in here, it's under embargo until that publication date on the 2nd of July. So if you do share any notes or anything about tonight, I'd ask that you leave the data out. However, on the 2nd of July, I'll be able to share a full copy of that report with everyone who's attended today as well. And at that point, please do share it absolutely as far and wide as you can. So in building the report, what did we do? So we provided free ongoing legal assistance to 147 renters who were specifically dealing with claims made against their bonds. And we conducted that survey more broadly of renters across Victoria. Now, in this case, when we talk about ongoing legal assistance, that looks like legal advice. We were negotiating with rental providers on behalf of our clients. We're providing support to the clients in preparing for mediation, and we're supporting them to prepare for VCAT, which is designed around self-representation. So we're helping them to prepare their case in the lead up to their VCAT hearings. Now, to give you a bit of a snapshot on some of the outcomes of that casework, we found that in 82% of the cases that closed within that 2-year period, the rental provider received less money than they had claimed initially. So that meant that when the renter was able to actually go through the process and attend their VCAT hearing or negotiate and see resolution, they were able to get more money back than they would have been able to otherwise. In a really staggering 39% of cases, the rental provider received nothing. Now that's really scary. And it's not because Anika Legal have incredible lawyers at all. It's because in these instances, the claim was completely unmeritorious. It was made for the sake of trying to cut out a slice of the bond money, not because there was any legitimate claim to that bond money. In total, for these 147 clients, we're able to secure the release of $112,000. Now, we deal exclusively with low-income Victorians, so that represents quite a significant saving for these individuals. And the average difference between what a rental provider claimed and what was actually received by the rental provider was $1,688, which again, for someone who is vulnerable, who is low income, it's a staggering amount of money to face losing for absolutely no reason whatsoever. One of the most shocking findings, though, was within this 2-year period, the average wait time for a VCAT hearing was 502 days. Now, what makes that really shocking is that while the renter is waiting for that hearing, their whole bond is locked away. So if a claim is made against their bond and they choose to fight it, they're choosing to go without any of that bond for almost a year and a half. And not many people who we work with are in the position to be able to make that decision. Now, the results from the survey, some highlights here as well. 84% of the renters who had experienced a claim against their bond reported that the process made them feel stressed and anxious. 43% reported that without being able to get their current bond back, that would impact their ability to pay their next bond. So that means that they might not actually be able to get a next property. This can lead to a cycle of disadvantage, which results in homelessness. And 14% of the survey respondents, not of our clients, but 14% of the survey respondents reported that they chose not to fight the bond claim at all because they needed to get the rest of their bond back. They simply couldn't wait for a VCAT hearing. I've got a couple of quotes that we received through the survey as well, and they're pretty concerning. So one renter said, "Every time the real estate agent's name is mentioned, I have anxiety attacks. I had to see a specialist to help deal with the anxiety." Another said that the bond dispute has given us severe anxiety leading to the end of our next lease, now feeling like we may continuously have to deal with the reality of homelessness. These are people just trying to live in a house. You know, they're people who just want a home. And it's truly shocking, the experience that some people are put through when all they're trying to do is rent a home. So Victorian renters, they face an uphill battle in reclaiming their bond once it's withheld. Through our casework, we've uncovered 3 key barriers to a fairer bond system. The first barrier is that existing power imbalances between renters and rental providers incentivize these unfair bond claims. There's a power imbalance between renters and rental providers. It's inherent in the Victorian rental system, and it definitely extends to bonds. And there's a few reasons for that. Rental providers are more likely to have access to the resources and representation needed to pursue a bond claim through VCAT, because they'll use a real estate agent to manage the whole process. Rental providers also tend to be in a much better financial position than renters, which means they're less impacted by wait times in processing claims through VCAT. They're not the ones who are needing to worry about going 502 days without potentially being able to pay a bond to move into their next house. And there we go. And the second barrier is that unfair bond claims, they delay tenancy dispute resolution, which exacerbates these delays. So the trend of baseless bond claims, and we found that 39% were completely baseless. It's really concerning given the significant backlog that already exists at VCAT. Our casework revealed that wait time was 502 days. That would definitely be shorter if baseless bond claims weren't going through, and it's only getting pushed further and further out the more baseless bond claims are going to VCAT. Renters are just opting to not wait that time. They're opting just to pay it. And the third barrier is that delays in dispute resolution force renters into worse situations. We reported that 43% of renters need their bond back to pay the bond in a new property. Government efforts to support these renters were insignificant. You might be familiar with the Rent Assist bond loan scheme. That is a scheme where the government will provide renters with an interest-free loan for the bond for a property. But to be eligible for that scheme, your rent can't be more than 55% of your wage. And that made a lot of sense when it was first introduced. At the time, the idea was that the government wouldn't help you pay for a fancy house that you can't afford, basically. But now, with the increasing cost of living and how slow wage growth has been, achieving your rent sitting under that 55% threshold is becoming less and less realistic for a lot of renters, and indeed for the people who would most benefit from that Rent Assist bond loan scheme. And so based on all these findings, and there's an awful lot more in the report, I'm really excited to share it with you on the 2nd of July, but based on those findings and based on these barriers we've identified, we've put together 3 recommendations for the Victorian State Government around what can be done to make the system more fair for renters. Now, the first recommendation is to adjust the eligibility criteria for the Rent Assist bond loan scheme to cater for rising rent. The reality is that the majority of renters are being forced to pay more rent than ideally they would be if the system was working perfectly. And by making more people eligible to take out one of these interest-free bond loans, it means that they can pay the bond on their next property and still be able to challenge an unmeritorious or a baseless bond claim on their last property. It's a simple change that could go a long way to making the system more fair. Now, the second recommendation is that the Victorian government implements the portable bond scheme urgently and this year. In its 2023 housing statement, the Victorian government committed to building a portable bond scheme. The idea is that renters can carry their bond from one property straight over to another rather than having to pay a new bond each time. And again, if a renter can move their bond directly from one property to the other, it also removes that problem of needing to wait to get one bond back before paying the next one. It doesn't solve the problem of needing to pay any claims against the bonds, but it does absolutely help to streamline the process for those 43% of renters who need their last bond to pay the next one. And the third recommendation is to introduce and streamline enforcement of civil penalties for rental providers and agent misconduct, which will disincentivize baseless bond claims as a matter of course. So renters will continue to be treated poorly as long as there is a low risk of negative consequences and as long as there's no effective mechanisms to address misconduct. Civil penalties for repeated misconduct by rental providers and their agents who consistently make frivolous bond claims could really reduce the number of bond disputes being initiated by rental providers overnight. The fact of the matter is that right now, the absolute worst case scenario for a landlord who decides just to make a claim on the bond for no reason, the worst case is that they don't get that money. That's it. Meanwhile, the renter needs to go through all this stress and anxiety and try to figure out how they're going to move house. It's completely unbalanced. And what we propose is that landlords who are repeatedly making these frivolous claims face some sort of civil penalty. It can be as simple as a fine, anything which is going to make someone think twice before going, maybe I won't put a claim in on this bond for no reason. And the reminder that in our study, we found that over a third of bond claims were completely unmeritorious. So if we remove those claims entirely, it's better for renters, but the cost of running a tribunal hearing at VCAT is expensive for the state government as well. If we extrapolate that 39% out to every bond claim that goes to VCAT, assuming that a similar proportion are unmeritorious, then we expect that doing this would actually save the Victorian state government about $14 million a year. There are significant real benefits to implementing reasons to make these baseless bond claims just a little bit more difficult. So what happens from here? Well, this is actually a really important moment in time in Victoria. The Victorian state government has indicated that they'll be opening up a consultation into the rental bond system later this year, which means that we actually have a real opportunity to have our recommendations heard and adopted. The easiest and most important thing we can do right now is to get as many people as possible to read, digest, and share this report once it's published. The more eyes that are on it, the more attention it gets, the louder our recommendations are, the more likely it is that this data we've collected can actually be used to drive real change. So we'll be publishing this report on the 2nd of July, and I'll make sure that you each get a copy. And what I would ask is that you read it, and if you agree with what we're pushing for, that you share it far and wide, because everyone does deserve a healthy home. And together, by doing this, we can take one more step towards that goal. So that is it from me. Thank you so much for your time.